Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be watching us today. This is still part of our anatomy review series on our subchapter on everything about the upper limb. For today, we will be focusing on all of the muscles of the upper limb. Of course, still in a simplified fashion. Our references for the muscles of the upper limb are still Netter and Moore's clinically oriented anatomy. First, we start with the muscles of the pectoral region and the axilla, starting with the pectoralis major. The pectoralis major is cut here, but it is actually the largest muscle in the pectoral region. Its origin is the medial half of the clavicle, as well as the manubrium and the body of the sternum, and the upper six costal cartilages. The pectoralis major inserts into the lateral lip of the intertubercular groove of the humerus, and it is innervated by the lateral and the medial pectoral nerves. The pectoralis major functions to flex, adduct, and medially rotate the arm. The pectoralis minor is deep or beneath the pectoral. We now look into the muscles of the shoulder girdle. For orientation, this is an image of a right shoulder. We are facing it anteriorly, so this is the anterior group of shoulder muscles, and behind it, of course, is the posterior muscle group. We will start with the deltoid muscle, which is cut in this view, but we can see that its origin is the lateral third of the clavicle, the acromion, and the spine of the scapula. The deltoid inserts into the deltoid tuberosity of the humerus, and it is innervated by the axillary nerve. The function of the deltoid muscle is to abduct, adduct, flex, extend, and rotate the arm medially and laterally. On top of the deltoid, superiorly is the supraspinatus. The supraspinatus originates from the supraspinous fossa of the scapula. Needless to say, it is the most superior in the shoulder muscle group, and it inserts into the superior facet of the greater tubercle of the humerus. It is innervated by the suprascapular nerve, and its function is to abduct the arm. Inferiorly, we can see here the infraspinatus. The infraspinatus originates, as the name implies, from the infraspinous fossa, and it inserts into the middle facet of the greater tubercle of the humerus. And just like the supraspinatus muscle, the infraspinatus are both innervated by the suprascapular nerve. The function of the infraspinatus is to rotate the arm laterally. The teres major muscle, shown here inferiorly, originates from the dorsal surface of the inferior angle of the scapula, and it inserts into the medial lip of the intertubercular groove of the humerus. It is innervated by the lower subscapular nerve, and the function of the teres major is to adduct and rotate the arm medially. On top of or superior to the teres major is the teres minor. The teres minor, shown here, originates from the upper portion of the lateral border of the scapula, and it inserts into the lower facet of the greater tubercle of the humerus. The teres minor is innervated by the axillary nerve, Therefore, we recall that for the shoulder muscles, the axillary nerve innervates the deltoid muscle as well as the teres minor muscle. The function of the teres minor is to rotate the arm laterally. We also recall that four of these muscles actually comprise the rotator cuff. We remember this by the acronym SITS. SITS stands for supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and the subscapularis, which we cannot see over here. The teres major, a popular question, is not part of the rotator cuff. Speaking of the subscapularis, we cannot see the subscapularis in this image because it is located in the posterior side, in the subscapular fossa. It inserts into the lesser tubercle of the humerus, and it is innervated by the upper and the lower subscapular nerves. And the subscapularis functions to adduct and rotate the arm medially. The latissimus dorsi, which is actually a rather large muscle, is not shown here in its entirety, but we can see its cut side here near its origin. The latissimus dorsi originates from the spines of T7 to T12, T7 to T12, the thoracolumbar fascia, the iliac crest, as well as ribs 9 to 12. And the latissimus dorsi inserts into the floor of the bicipital groove of the humerus. The latissimus dorsi is innervated by the thoracodorsal nerve, and its function is to adduct, extend, and rotate the arm medially. Because of these functions, the latissimus dorsi is usually prominent among both rowers. Again, another popular question. Next, let's go into the muscles of the arm. For orientation, this is the anterior view of the right arm, and we start with the coracobrachialis over here. The coracobrachialis being deep to the biceps brachii, which is the largest muscle in this region. The coracobrachialis has its origin from the coracoid process, which, as we recall, is a part of the shoulder blade or the scapula, and it inserts into the middle third of the medial surface of the humerus. It is innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve, and the function of the coracobrachialis is to flex and adduct the arm. The muscle occupying the bulk of the arm is the biceps brachii. The biceps brachii actually has a long head and a short head. The origin of the long head is in the supraglenoid tubercle, whereas the origin of the short head of the biceps brachii is the coracoid process, which is again from the scapula. This is the long head of the biceps brachii, and over here is the short head of the biceps brachii. Both long head and short heads insert into the radial tuberosity of the radius. And just like the coracobrachialis, it is innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. The biceps brachii functions to flex the arm and the forearm, and it supinates the forearm. Supination meaning it's oriented like this, anteriorly. Pronation is when you make the arms face posteriorly. Number three, muscle of interest in the arm is the brachialis. The brachialis is seen here. It is partially occluded by the biceps brachii. The brachialis has its origin from the lower anterior surface of the humerus, and it inserts into the coronoid process of the ulna and the ulnar tuberosity. Just like the first two muscles discussed, the brachialis is innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. Therefore, some pearls for the arm muscles, the musculocutaneous nerve innervates the coracobrachialis, the biceps brachii, and the brachialis, or CBB. The function of the brachialis is to flex the forearm. The triceps is not shown here because it is located posteriorly in the posterior compartment of the arm, but its origin is the long head of the humerus, the infraglenoid tubercle, the lateral head superior to the radial groove of the humerus, and the medial head of the triceps is inferior to the radial groove. The triceps inserts into the posterior surface of the olecranon process of the ulna, and it is innervated by the radial nerve. The radial nerve. And as we may deduce, the function of the triceps is to extend the forearm. The anconus or ansonius is a smaller muscle, also located posteriorly, whose origin is in the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and it also inserts into the olecranon and the upper posterior surface of the ulna. Just like the triceps muscle, the anconus is innervated by the radial nerve. And it also, just like the triceps, extends the forearm. Therefore, the radial nerve, some mnemonic again, innervates the triceps and the anconus. So we remember this by TAR. Triceps, anconus, innervated by the radial nerve. Let us now go into the different muscles of the forearm, starting with a view of the anterior forearm. The forearm has more muscles than the rest of the upper limb because most of these muscles are smaller and perform finer movements and functions. Starting here with the pronator teres. The pronator teres has its origin from the medial epicondyle and the coronoid process of the ulnar bone, and it inserts into the middle of the lateral side of the radius. The pronator teres is innervated by the median nerve, and its function, as the term suggests, it pronates and flexes the forearm. Adjacent to it is the flexor carpi radialis. The flexor carpi radialis has its origin also from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it inserts into the bases of the second and the third metacarpals. It is also innervated by the median nerve, and its function is to flex the forearm and flex and abduct the hand. Medial to it, adjacent to the flexor carpi radialis, is the palmaris longus. The palmaris longus over here. The palmaris longus also originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it inserts into the flexor retinaculum and the palmar aponeurosis of the hand. It is also innervated by the median nerve, and its function is also to flex the forearm and the hand. Finally, adjacent to the palmaris longus and the most medial of the group is the flexor carpi ulnaris. The flexor carpi ulnaris has its origin from the medial epicondyle of the humeral head, the medial olecranon, and the posterior border of the ulna. It inserts into the pisiform, which is one of the carpal bones. It's part of the first row or the proximal row of the carpal bones, the hook of the hamate, and base of the fifth metacarpal. The flexor carpi ulnaris, in contrast to the first three, is innervated by the ulnar nerve. And it also flexes the forearm and flexes and adducts the hand. The last three muscles mentioned, the flexor carpi radialis, the palmaris longus, and the flexor carpi ulnaris, are actually part of a group called the wrist flexor group, precisely because they function to flex the wrist. And what is distinct or special in this group is that they are all innervated by the median nerve except for the flexor carpi ulnaris, as the name suggests, because the flexor carpi ulnaris is innervated by the ulnar nerve. We now move more distally towards the hand and wrist this time. We look at the flexor digitorum superficialis. The flexor digitorum superficialis originates also from the medial epicondyle, the coronoid process, and the oblique line of the radius. And it inserts into the middle phalanges of the finger. It is innervated by the median nerve, and the function of the flexor digitorum superficialis is, as the name implies, to flex the PIPs, the proximal interphalangeal joints, and they also flex the hand and the forearm. Deep to these muscles is the flexor digitorum profundus. The flexor digitorum profundus has its origin from the anteromedial surface of the ulna and the interosseous membrane, and it inserts into the bases of the distal phalanges of the fingers. The flexor digitorum profundus is special because it has a dual innervation by the ulnar and the median nerves. The ulnar and the median nerves innervate the flexor digitorum profundus. And their function is to flex the distal interphalangeal joints and the hand. A smaller muscle, distally even, closer to the wrist, is the flexor pollicis longus over here. The flexor pollicis longus. The flexor pollicis longus has its origin from the anterior surface of the radius, the interosseous membrane, and the coronoid process, and it inserts into the base of the distal phalanx of the thumb. When we hear the term pollicis, it refers to the thumb. And the FPL, the flexor pollicis longus, is innervated by the median nerve. And its function is to flex the thumb. Finally, before we leave the anterior forearm compartment, is the pronator quadratus. The pronator quadratus over here. It has its origin from the anterior surface of the distal ulna, and it inserts into the anterior surface of the distal radius. It has its origin, it is innervated rather by the median nerve, and its function is to pronate the forearm. It is called quadratus because it resembles a rectangle or a square. I'll have to hide my webcam for now so that I'm not blocking the table. But suppose let us pronate the same aforementioned right forearm and therefore look at the muscles of the posterior forearm. For orientation, this is a right forearm and it is pronated so that to the left of our screen is the medial aspect of the forearm, and to the right of the screen is the lateral aspect of the right forearm. Let us start with this muscle over here called the brachioradialis. The brachioradialis has its origin from the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus, and it inserts into the base of the radial styloid process. It is innervated by the radial nerve, and its function is to flex the forearm. You will actually notice that all of the posterior forearm muscles are innervated by the radial nerve, all of them. Moving more distally, but still in the lateral side, is the extensor carpi radialis longus. It has its origin also from the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus, and it inserts into the dorsum of the base of the second metacarpal. Again, innervated by the radial nerve, and its function is to extend and abduct the hand. Adjacent to it, moving more medially, is the extensor carpi radialis brevis. The extensor carpi radialis brevis has its origin from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and it inserts into the posterior base of the third metacarpal this time. It extends and abducts the hand also. Adjacent, moving still more medially, is the extensor digitorum. The extensor digitorum originates from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and it inserts into the extensor expansion and the base of the middle and the distal phalanges. It extends the fingers as well as the hand. Adjacent to the extensor digitorum is the extensor digiti minimi, or the EDM. The extensor digiti minimi originates from the common extensor tendon and the interosseous membrane, and it inserts into the extensor expansion also, as well as the base of the middle and the distal phalanges, just like the extensor digitorum. And it also extends the little finger, hence the name digiti minimi, which stands for little finger. Adjacent to it, moving more medially still, is the extensor carpi ulnaris, or the ECU. The extensor carpi ulnaris originates from the lateral epicondyle and the posterior surface of the ulna, and it inserts into the base of the fifth metacarpal. Its function is to extend and adduct the hand. The supinator, our seventh muscle in the posterior forearm muscle group, is actually deep to the extensor muscles, but its origin is also the lateral epicondyle, the radial collateral and annular ligaments, as well as the supinator fossa and the crest of the ulna. The supinator inserts into the lateral side of the upper part of the radius, and its function is to supinate the forearm. Moving more distally still towards the hand and the wrist, we have the abductor pollicis longus. The abductor pollicis longus originates from the interosseous membrane, the middle third of the posterior surfaces of the radius, and the ulna. It inserts into the lateral surface of the base of the first metacarpal. Its function is to abduct, that is, move away, the thumb and the hand. Adjacent to the abductor pollicis longus, more medially, is the extensor pollicis longus, or the EPL. The extensor pollicis longus also originates from the interosseous membrane and the middle third of the posterior surface of the ulna, just like the abductor pollicis longus. It inserts into the base of the distal phalanx of the thumb, and it extends the distal phalanx of the thumb and abducts the hand. Finally, more medially still, is the extensor pollicis brevis, again originating from the same interosseous membrane and the posterior surface of the middle third of the radius. Again, we recall that whenever the term pollicis is mentioned, we are actually referring to the thumb. The extensor pollicis brevis inserts into the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb, and it extends the proximal phalanx of the thumb and abducts the hand. Finally, more distally still, classified now as an extrinsic muscle of the hand, a term which we shall discuss later on, is the extensor indicis over here. The extensor indicis has its origin from the posterior surface of the ulna and the interosseous membrane, and it inserts into the extensor expansion of the index finger. And its function is to extend the index finger, the extensor indicis. Finally, we look at the hand itself. When we talk about the muscles of the hand, there is a key distinction between extrinsic muscles and intrinsic muscles of the hand. Essentially, extrinsic muscles of the hand are all of the muscles whose origin are from the forearm. The origin is not from the hand. And it just so happens that these muscles insert into the hand and therefore have some effect in controlling hand motion. Intrinsic hand muscles, on the other hand, are the muscles of the hand which are located within the hand itself and have both their origin and insertion in the hand. Intrinsic hand muscles are responsible for the finer motor functions of the hand, whereas the extrinsic hand muscles are the muscles responsible for coarser, gross movements. All of the muscles that we will discuss in this slide are intrinsic muscles of the hand because we have already previously discussed the extrinsic hand muscles when we talked about the forearm muscles. Let us start with the abductor pollicis brevis over here. For orientation, this is a right hand. It is supinated, and to the left of our hand is the lateral aspect, and to the right is the medial aspect. The abductor pollicis brevis over here originates from this one, this structure called the flexor retinaculum. It also originates from the scaphoid and the trapezium, which are carpal bones. And the abductor pollicis brevis inserts into the lateral side of the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. Again, when we hear the term pollicis, it has something to do with the thumb. It is innervated by the median nerve, and its function, as the term suggests, is to abduct the thumb. Moving more medially, adjacent to it is the flexor pollicis brevis. The flexor pollicis brevis has its origin also from the flexor retinaculum and the trapezium muscle, bone rather, and it inserts into the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. It is also innervated by the median nerve, and its function, as the term implies, is to flex the thumb. The opponent's pollicis is a muscle distal and lateral to the other two. The opponent's pollicis has its origin also from the flexor retinaculum and the trapezium, just like the first two muscles, and it inserts into the lateral side of the first metacarpal. Also innervated by the median nerve, the opponent's pollicis opposes the thumb to the other digits, such as when we make an OK sign. Moving more medially again, we have the adductor pollicis. The adductor pollicis originates from the capitate and bases of the second and third metacarpals. And for the transverse head of the adductor pollicis, it originates from the palmar surface of the third metacarpal. The adductor pollicis inserts into the medial side of the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb, and this time it is innervated by the ulnar nerve. As the term implies, the adductor pollicis adducts the thumb, that is, it brings the thumb closer to the hand. The palmaris brevis is a muscle not shown in this diagram because it is deep to the rest of the muscles, but its origin is the medial side of the flexor retinaculum and the palmar aponeurosis. It inserts into the skin of the medial side of the palm. It is innervated by the ulnar nerve, and the palmaris brevis functions to wrinkle skin on the medial side of the palm. Moving now more medially, let us look at this muscle over here. You can follow my cursor along. This is the abductor digiti minimi. The abductor digiti minimi. The abductor digiti minimi originates from the pisiform, which is again a carpal bone, and the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris, which is this one, the flexor carpi ulnaris tendon. The abductor digiti minimi inserts into the medial side of the base of the proximal phalanx of the little finger, as shown here in my cursor. It is innervated by the ulnar nerve and it abducts or pulls away the little finger. Digiti minimi pertains to the little finger. Adjacent to it, more lateral, is the flexor digiti minimi brevis. The flexor digiti minimi brevis originates from the flexor retinaculum and the hook of the hamate, and it inserts into the medial side of the base of the proximal phalanx, also of the little finger. Innervated by the ulnar nerve, it functions to flex the proximal phalanx of the little finger. Deep to the flexor digiti minimi brevis as well as the abductor digiti minimi is a special muscle over here called the opponens digiti minimis. The opponens digiti minimis. It also originates from the flexor retinaculum and the hook of the hamate, inserts into the medial side of the fifth metacarpal, and is also innervated by the ulnar nerve. So in general, you will notice that except for a few special exceptions, the side over here in the medial side is mostly innervated by the ulnar nerve, whereas intrinsic hand muscles in the lateral aspect is generally innervated by the median nerve. The opponens digiti minimi functions to oppose the little finger. The lumbricals, another special muscle group over here. The lumbricals are actually five in number. The lumbricals arise from the lateral side of the tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus, and they insert into the lateral side of the extensor expansion. It is innervated by the median nerve. For the two lateral lumbricals, the two lateral lumbricals are this one, which we are marking with lines. The two lateral lumbricals innervated by the median nerve, as we have mentioned previously, and the two medial lumbricals are innervated by the ulnar nerve. In general, again, our special rule, most of the intrinsic hand muscles located in the medial side are innervated by the ulnar nerve, whereas those located in the lateral side are innervated by the median nerve. The function of the lumbricals is to flex the metacarpophalangeal joints and extend the interphalangeal joints. Deep to these muscles is the dorsal interossei muscles. Like the lumbricals, there are four dorsal interossei muscles. The lumbricals are four, the dorsal interossei are also four muscles. They originate from adjacent sides of the metacarpal bones, and they insert into the lateral sides of the bases of the proximal phalanges. and the extensor expansion. All of the dorsal interossei, unlike the lumbricals, all of them are innervated by the ulnar nerve. And the function of the dorsal interossei is to abduct the fingers, such as when we try to make a web out of our fingers. We They also function to flex the MCPs, the metacarpophalangeal joints, as well as extending the interphalangeal joints. Finally, the palmar interossei muscle over here, these are actually small muscles. One, two, three. Kindly follow my cursor. The palmar interossei, one, two, three. These are three small muscles. So the lumbricals are four, the dorsal interossei are four, but the palmar interossei are only three. So you can think of three palm trees. They originate from the medial side of the second metacarpal, the lateral sides of the fourth and fifth metacarpals, and they insert into the base of the proximal phalanges in the same sides as their origins. They are also innervated by the ulnar nerve. All three of them are innervated by the ulnar nerve, and their function is opposite to the dorsal interossei. If the dorsal interossei muscles abduct the fingers, the palmar interossei bring the fingers together. They adduct the fingers. They also flex the MCPs and extend the interphalangeal joints. Thank you very much for joining us today. So that will do it for our series. And please stay tuned for the rest of the upper limb review videos. Thank you and have a good day.